Hi, this is Linda Stallings with Chesapeake Dog Training in Annapolis, Maryland, and just working on putting together some kind of informational videos to supplement what we go over in private lessons, and also to just supply more information for some of the board and train owners when the dogs come home, so you can watch it again if you miss what I say when we meet. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about the remote collar. This is one of the tools that I like to use quite a bit, and so just wanted to give everyone kind of some idea of what it's like coming straight out of the box and how to set it up. I'll do another video at a later time about more detail about how to use it and how to fit it. But I literally just wanted to show everyone how to get it out of the box and set it up, because there's a lot of different ways to set it up. And a lot of trainers set it up slightly differently, but I wanted to show you the way that I feel most comfortable using this collar. So this is the Mini Educator 300TS. The company is really fantastic to work with, and great customer service and all that. So it's a really good product. And I've had them for years and they still have yet to really have any problems. So when you open it, it has a really pretty good owner's manual and instruction booklet. It also comes with, it has the remote that you hold, the collar that the dog wears, and then it has a charger. It also has a lanyard if you want to wear it around your neck. A lot of times I put like a key ring on this bottom part, and then a carabiner or a clip so I can wear it on my belt. But whatever your preference is fine. It also comes with some extra contact points for dogs that have very long fur. And I'll show you where they are. This is the collar part of it, and this is where the contact points are, right? These two pokey parts that stick out. And it's my least favorite part about the collars. These do have to be pretty firmly or snugly touching the dog's neck, both of them. And you see these are a little bit shorter. The ones that, the extra ones that comes with, are a little bit longer to kind of make their way more through the hair. There are also, there's lots of accessories you can have for this, and one that I found very useful for dogs with really short hair. Some of the pit bulls, or also very small dogs, there's one called a comfort pad, and you take these two off and then it kind of has four smaller ones, shorter ones. That can be very useful for some dogs too, but the large majority just wear it straight out of the box and it's good to go. But like I say, these two parts have to be touching the dog's neck at all times. So first of all, let's talk about charging it. This is the charger, like a lot of electronics we would have today. This part plugs into the wall, of course, and then this splitter is what plugs into the collar and the remote. So the collar has a little flap on the back, you can see that, and the remote does as well, right there. I would suggest or remind you that after you charge it, make sure that these rubber little gasket things are pretty snugly pressed back down, because if hair or dirt or something gets in there, it just can really mess up the works a little bit. And this can rub on the dog's neck, so this one in particular I always make sure is pushed down nice and tight so that water and all kinds of other things don't get in there. The collar is fairly simple. I mean, it has a pretty large box on it, which is tricky for some small dogs, but I've literally used them on dogs under 5 pounds after speaking at length with the company representatives, and there's you know, a little extra precautions you take with dogs that small, but just so you know that even though this box is fairly large, it can go on pretty small dogs too. There's no antenna or anything in this collar part, so once you put it on the dog, you can easily take a pair of pretty big scissors and cut it to fit, so you don't have all this extra. And you can also buy replacement collars and things like that, so if you cut it too short or something, it's not a big emergency, we can get another one. And so when you put it on the dog, you want it to be high up by the ears and snug. You want to barely be able to get your fingers under here, and so that's why you want it on the smallest part of the dog's neck so that it can't kind of move up and down their neck. And then of course there's lots and lots of holes, so you just pick whichever hole is easiest. If you're someone who worries about what hole it should be on, sometimes I'll take some white out or some fingernail polish and just mark the hole so you don't have to think about it or worry about it every time. That's one solution. So to turn them on, oh, the other thing is that I think the charge lasts about 2 or 3 days. So typically I will charge the collar, turn this on, and just leave them on, whether the collar's on or off the dog until the batteries wear out. You'll know it's starting to die when this light here and this light here start to blink orangish and then red. That's when it starts to die. When they're fully charged and good to go, they will blink green every couple seconds. Okay, to turn this part on, there's a big button on the back. It says L, it says on, off, and L. I push that in long enough until it turns on. So I'll push it and you can see it turn off. So I'm pushing the button until it turns off. Okay? So I'm going to push it again to turn it back on. There we go. So you have to push it for a little while. The other button, there's one other button on the back and it says M/C. That button changes the function of these two buttons. And if you look on the face on the front, you'll see when I push it, there's an M and a C that kind of toggle back and forth between each other. The M stands for momentary and the C stands for continuous. So that momentary means that no matter how long you push these buttons, it's just a quick little flick of stimulation. But I don't like to use that anymore because I find what happens is that in order for the dog to really be affected by something that quick, people end up turning it up really, really high. And so I'd rather just have it be continuous and on manual and just know as the operator that you can push it for a long time or a short time based on what you need in the moment. So I like to leave it with just the C. The other thing you'll notice, and so also there's this dial on the top, and the dial is what increases and decreases the level of stimulation. And it goes 0 to 100 and it will just say high. You'll also see that there's a 1D blinking at the top there. That stands for one dog. You can get the same remote to communicate with 2 dogs, and then there would be a 2D blinking down below, and it changes the function of these 2 buttons a little bit. But for the most part, people just have 1 dog and are using it with 1 dog. Although it's very useful with 2 dogs too, to have the same remote communicate with both dogs. And that's a pretty specialized case, but I also like to get 2 remotes for 2 dogs, especially if there's 2 people. But like I say, that's a specialized case. So for the most part, we have 1 dog. We leave the 1D blinking so that we can adjust it. We want to have the C. If we ever got to a situation where we would want to move away from being able to adjust it, then if you push down on the dial long enough, it will kind of freeze it in place and it can no longer be adjusted. So the 1D goes solid, and then whatever the setting is what it stays on. But I like to just leave it manual. So I push it back in, you see the 1D goes back to blinking, and I can turn it up and down. Okay? The buttons on this side, you can see there's a letter T. There's a single button on one side. T stands for vibrate. That's the vibrate function. And I've gotten so I don't use that so much either, except maybe for deaf dogs. Or if for any reason we want to have another kind of cue for another synonym for come. For recall, I might use a vibrate. But otherwise don't use it so much. It usually is pretty alarming for the dogs because it really is the vibrate's pretty strong, and obviously it's on their neck so they can feel it very well. On this side there are 2 buttons, a black S and the red S. The S I think stands for stimulation, or so what I always think it does. The black is kind of the base level, or whatever level you can see on the remote. The red is factory set to be 5 higher than that. So you can see if this is on 10, if I push the red button, it goes to 15. You can set these to be anything you want, and it's all in the owner's manual, but typically what I do is don't really worry about the red button, because for some dogs a difference of 5 in some situations is significant, and for some dogs it's non-existent. So it's not a very reliable boost. There's some certain situations where we might set this to be something in particular, but for the most part I just leave it all on manual, and then you just always know what you got and you're in control of it, and you don't have to worry about going back and forth between a lot of different buttons. The best way to hold this remote is in your right hand. So if you're left-handed, it's a little bit tricky because you end up having to kind of hold it backwards, I think, to make it work. Or if your dog is heeling on the right side of you, you might find it easier to hold it in your left hand. So those are just things to talk to me about in the lessons, or think about beforehand. But the ideal thing, if you're right-handed, is to hold this in your right hand and have your dog on your left hand. Then what you can do is put your middle finger on the black button, so that your index finger and your thumb can increase and decrease level of stimulation at the same time that you're pushing the button in some cases. Okay, so to me that's actually the most important thing about a remote. That's why I like this remote so much, where some of the other brands, some of the cheaper brands they just get online or at the local pet store, don't have that function, and it makes it much more difficult to communicate the dog, because you have to kind of push the button and then stop and then adjust it and then push the button, and by then the moment's passed. So being able to push the button and increase and decrease the level of stimulation at the same time is hugely important. So anyway, to turn the collar on, I don't know if you can see, but there's a red dot on the top, and there's also a red dot on this remote. So what you're going to do is you're just going to get the two close enough together. They kind of marry each other, and then this light goes green. It's hard for me to show you in the camera, but basically I just get them close enough together so that I can turn this on and off. And you'll know that it's on when this little bar right here has a green light in it. You'll see it flash. There it went. It flashed every couple seconds, but when that bar goes green for a little while, that means that it's on. Okay. Sometimes I'll check it too by just doing the vibrate, and you can see when I push the button, the red light goes on both the remote and the collar, and of course I can very easily feel and hear the vibrate over here. So that's kind of how to turn them on and off, both of them. And then, like I say, to turn this one off, you just kind of marry the two red dots together again until this light goes red. And then this, you just want to have it handy, so you can either put the lanyard around your neck, you can put a little carabiner or a clip to your belt. But that's kind of the main points of turning them on and off. And for the first, depending on the dog, but in most situations, once we start to introduce the collar, we would leave it on the dog for a decent amount of time. In fact, all day in most cases. And if you do that, you want to take these contact points. You're gonna, it's a muscle stimulator. This collar is a muscle stimulator, so it needs to be in a muscle. So it's usually on one side of the dog's neck or the other. So after about 4 hours, it's suggested that you move to the other side of the neck. And that's just because the collar's on snug and you have these two contact points touching the skin. Then you can, risk having some pressure points or something. But if you, move it around, then that kind of eliminates that risk. The stimulation that you can feel, I typically can feel it at about an 8 if I'm really paying attention. Just to give you an idea, most dogs have a working level of somewhere between 4 and 8 or 9, usually at the most. And the working level is just kind of the lowest level they can feel. So it depends a little bit on the dog, but that gives you some idea of the range. And then correction levels, could be as low as the teens and then up into the 70s, 80s, or higher, depending on the level of distraction and the individual dog. All dogs are going to have a different relative scale of what they can feel and what will be meaningful to them or not in a different situation. So don't worry so much about the number on here because it will vary quite a bit. That's why I like to leave it on manual. The other thing, just to say as a disclaimer, if you have children in your house like I do, we have the rule that kids are not allowed to touch the yellow part of the collar, or of the yellow part of the remote, and that's just because, and even for some grown-ups, you have to, when you use a Verso equipment, you respect it, you teach the dog properly, you fit it properly, and you educate yourself about it. But this getting into the wrong hands, or someone who just doesn't know any better, is definitely not fair to the dog and can be pretty difficult. So whenever the collar is on the dog, make sure you know where the remote is, and make sure that anyone that would have access to it knows that the collar is on the dog. So just a word of warning. But and it's obviously pretty much common sense, but just to make sure everyone knows that don't leave this unattended when the collar is on the dog. And also have it on you so that you can use it. A lot of times I see people are so great to remember to leave the collar on the dog, but then the remote's in the other room when they need it, and that's not very useful either. The longer the dog wears the collar, the less association there is between, I mean, the dog knows if the collar's on or off, but that just becomes the new way of communicating. So there's no problem with leaving this on if you keep rotating it, but then just always make sure you know where the remote is. Okay? I think that is the nutshell version of the collar, and like I say, I'll do another video with more detail about how to fit it on the dog and how to introduce it to the dog. Okay, thanks.